Welcome everybody, here we are again, Aging with Grace, our weekly live show, or
disgracefully,
as we like to say. I think we're both going to grow old disgracefully.
A little bit, it's a nice fine balance.
No, I'm going completely disgracefully,
yeah,
100% disgracefully. So this week's show is all about reinventing yourself as you age, as you mature. When I wrote my article, I was really thinking about it. You know, if you think about your 20s, and I've got, you know, a daughter who's 22, and I look back to my 20s, it's all about self-discovery, isn't it? And experimenting. And then in your 30s, I got married in my 30s, had my children, 2 of my children in my 30s. And that's very much about making choices and commitments. 40s, I kind of sort of feel, and it sounds quite negative, but 40s is the sort of about the obligation.
Well, you're sort of carrying on with the decisions that you made in your 30s or your earlier years. In your 40s, you're sort of just following them through.
Yeah. And it's more, it's like the obligation, isn't it, of, and being there for everybody, and, you know, and not so much about you, but everybody else. And then I was, you know, 50s, I was thinking, you're sort of, whether you've got children leaving home, careers changing, or you might be starting a career, there's this sense of sort of freedom, isn't there? And possibility. And when I hit my 50s, I wrote another article about midlife crisis, because I think part of it is you start thinking about your life, your dreams, your ambitions. Who am I? Who have I become?
Who do I want to be?
Who do I want to be? And it's almost like going back into your 20s, and it's about self-discovery again. But the big difference is in your 20s, everything's ahead of you, isn't it?
Yeah.
In your 50s, you've got less time ahead of you. So that sort of play. So for me, this reinvention, or this midlife, not midlife crisis, I hate that because it's so negative, but midlife choices where you can understand a little bit more about who you are, what you want, what your needs are, what your desires, your ambitions, and almost rediscover. Maybe it's rediscover yourself rather than reinvent yourself.
Yeah, and potentially I've seen quite a few people say it's actually it's a time when you can become the person that in a way you should always have been, but maybe life got in the way earlier on, or, you know, you decided you wanted children, or you decided you didn't want children. So life maybe, I'm not going to say stopped you becoming the person, because you've always been the person you should be at that time in your life. But I have read so many times that it's a chance for you to become the person that you really want to be and the person you want to be now. But one thing I am going to say, because I was talking to people in the hairdressers earlier today.
Yes, you did.
Whilst I was there, I thought, right, I'm doing this show later, and I'm going to speak to people about it. And one thing that came up was, yes, it can be this time, but it totally comes down to your mindset.
100%.
Which is the same throughout life. You know, this is not exclusive to your 50s or your 40s or whatever. Because obviously, and this is what we're constantly trying to fight against, there is this negative aspect to this age that we're all going to go, ooh.
Yeah, over the hill, past it, give up.
Don't start anything now. Oh, you know, you're on the slow decline.
Yeah.
So I think there may be people watching or listening that might think, I don't actually feel that way, Grace. I don't feel like this is a time to be reinvented. I feel this is a time when I'm actually sort of withdrawing or feeling invisible or whatever. So maybe we can talk about that as we get into this.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I wonder whether you have to have, I've got a really good girlfriend of mine who's a psychotherapist, and she works a lot with women, middle-aged women, women going through menopause. And she was saying there's sort of 2 halves of this age. One is where physically your body's changing, your energy levels are changing, your hormones are changing, then you hit menopause, or you're, you know, even if you're exercising, you're like, oh, my knee hurts, or, you know, sometimes in the winter, I can feel like I'm going to get rheumatoid arthritis, or, so your body starts slowing down and changing. There is a lot of physical negativity. Then you've got the other side of that, which we've talked about, that pro-age, anti-age, this sort of ageist society where age doesn't have that value. It's not associated with youth. Beauty's not associated with age or vitality, or it's a negative, and that can impact your confidence. So if you're feeling invisible, or you're not as confident, or feeling not catered for because of your age, or not just feeling attractive, you're not going to have a true sense of agency, are you? You're not going to say, you know what, I've hit my 50s, I'm owning it, this is about me now. So it's a mindset, and I think the opportunities are there. I think the possibility, I think the opportunities, we all have the ability, but it takes hard work. And that hard work, I think, is overcoming the negative rhetoric and the self-doubt. And I think women, we are our worst critics, aren't we? We will say, I can't do that, not able to do that, or there's no point me doing, it's not about me, it's about the kids or family or husband or partner or parents, and actually saying, it is about me, and you know what, I matter. And my friend psychotherapist, the work that she does, she says it's really important women into their middle age, into their 50s, say, I matter.
Right.
I'm important and I matter.
I think if you were to ask me right now, I mean, I've not hit my 50s yet, so I am speaking to someone in their late 40s. I think it totally depends on the day, because I will have days where I go, I am so excited. I think this is a great time, and I absolutely 100% believe this. This is a great time of life, and I'm setting up a newsletter, and I'm doing this with you, and I'm doing lots of really exciting things. And then there are other days where I go, I don't think I want to do that actually. I think I'd quite like to just sit on my settee and just have a little nap, have a little nana nap. And I think that's just me, as always, being really honest, that I do think this is a perfect time to come into our own. But I think realistically, we also have to know that we like having a bedtime sometimes. We like to have quiet days. I'm talking me personally, obviously. So
I get that, because I think about this quite a lot, and I wonder whether it's much more volatile and it's much more a roller coaster. So I go back to when I'm in my 20s and 30s. I was always really positive, can-do attitude. I'm going to put myself out there, I'm going to make it happen. There was no belief that I wouldn't achieve those things. But I didn't have life experiences where I had loss or pain or devastation or failure or all those sort of things. And I wonder, when you get into your 40s and 50s, there is a realism and a reality to life. And you know what? Life is really, really hard. It's got a lot of pain, a lot of sorrow, a lot of devastation, desperation, imposter syndrome, all those things. So when you're up, you're really up. But when you come down, you've got to work. There are days
I feel fight against previous experience. What did I read the other day? It's some middle age is something along the lines of where hope has to triumph experience.
Absolutely.
To have a positive.
Because if you focused on the experience and the experience of life, and we do have a negative bias, it goes back to our survival instinct, because otherwise we'd be eaten. So that negative bias, and then like the experience creates a negative rhetoric, and it just pulls you down. And women, I just think our self-talk is so bad. We put ourselves under so much pressure, and we tell ourselves, you can't do that, or no. It's like, you never say that to a friend.
Why would anyone want to listen to you? Or why would anyone want to see you? Why should you do that? I've been, as we've talked about, I have been my own worst self-critic this year, worse than I have ever been. I literally just had a month where I was like the evil bitch from hell, came and camped out on my shoulder and basically trashed my self-confidence and my self-esteem. All down to me. I mean, how ridiculous. And
if I felt the same and I was having that conversation, you'd be going,
exactly.
Grace, come on, blah, blah, blah.
I would never say that to you.
Exactly, but we don't do it to ourselves. And obviously lockdown and everybody has different life experiences and pressures and things going on. So I've had my own little crisis, not from a confidence perspective, but just some really big, you know, we had a really sad loss in the family, a big move, separation after 22 years, all this sort of stuff. So it wasn't a confidence thing, but it was a negativity that I'm not, I can't explain it. It's almost an anxiety and a sense of panic that I'm not going to be able to get through it. Now, the one thing that age has given me is an understanding and a reality. Whatever life throws at me, I have always got through it, and I've always come out the other side.
Yeah.
So it was like, Grace, you know this, and you've been through a lot worse in your life, but you've picked yourself up and you kept going, you've come through it. But it is that negative rhetoric pulling you down. So I feel such a big part of it is mindset, and you have to work really hard at it, don't you?
To me, I always describe it like exercise. So we're both into exercise. We know if we want to be the best possible people that we can be, we have to exercise, whatever that exercise is, but it's something that you have to frequently do. For me, that's the same with your mindset.
Yeah.
So as we've said, naturally our brains defer to the negative. It was to help us survive from those saber-toothed tigers and whatever else was going to get us. They're no longer there, but our brain still thinks they are. We've got to exercise those positivity muscles.
Absolutely.
So I don't want this to turn into it's a negative thing. I just know that we have to be aware that our brains will default at times to the negative, whether that's life experience or whatever, that we as women, and particularly of our age, we've got to fight. We have to work against this on a daily, so we have to exercise those muscles.
Totally agree. And sometimes it's the fear of something, because you play out the fear, don't you? And I'm moving in a couple of weeks, and trying to find a house in this market post-COVID has been an absolute nightmare. And this negative rhetoric and fear in my mind is, I am going to be homeless. I'm not going to be able to find anywhere to live, to house my children and my dog and my cat, and I'm going to be homeless. Well, I'm not going to be homeless, but in my head and in my mind, I was going to be homeless, which is a really extreme, outrageous thought. But also it then drives the emotion. So it's driving this emotion where I'm feeling worried in my stomach, because I carry stress and anxiety in my stomach.
That's me too.
So going back to the sort of exercising, and you're right, it's like a muscle, and that sort of positivity, and there are little things that I do. And one is, I tell myself every single morning, because I can be overwhelmed, there's a lot going on with Studio 10 and it's exciting as well, but I say to myself every single morning, one step in front. And you all only need to worry about the step that you're taking. Don't play out 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, because you can't really control that.
No.
And
things will have changed before those 3 months arrive anyway.
And things would have changed. And I think that's sort of the negative rhetoric, which sort of goes back to what you said a second ago, was it's when you lose hope and faith, because negativity strips you, it robs you of those things. And if you don't have hope, and then the other thing that I do, because I wake up early, I'm quite disciplined, I like to wake up early. I found myself getting into this routine. I was getting up at 6:30 and I was like, I'll start working. Before the kids get up, I'll start working. Hoping I'd get through the day, and then I might finish earlier to maybe go to the gym or walk the dog and stuff. And actually what happened is I didn't. I ended up working all the time. So I said, right, when I wake up, the first thing I'm going to do is walk the dog.
Right.
So I make myself a cup of tea, I walk the dog, and that sets me up for the day. And I know it sounds, I don't know, it sounds probably a bit overly spiritual and stuff, but being outside, feeling the weather, whether it's the sun shining, the wind blowing, you are connecting with nature, and it does ground you. And it's me time, it's my time. I do that. I do positive mantras. I used to do affirmations like every day. I've got a big affirmation on my fridge. But I just tell myself one step front of the other, and that's all you need to worry about. And you will get through this. So don't create stress and anxiety and fear and panic, because that's not actually going to help. And if anything, it makes it worse for you, doesn't it?
Of course it does, because when you're emotional, your brain doesn't think straight.
Yeah.
And we need our brain to think straight to get us through the day. And I mean, I don't have the life that you have. I'm not running my own business. And yet I can wake up in the morning and be overwhelmed by what I need to do. So I'm always in absolute admiration of like people who are running a business as well as doing everything else that I have to do. So I think it's all about just finding what works for you. So I've been reading a lot about this, and I've been talking to people, whether on social media or friends, and we've all got our different things. So I like to get up, and the first thing that I tend to do after I've laid in bed for a little while, because I'm not very good at responding to that alarm. I'm definitely like, no, I love my bed. I really love my bed. So once I've like had that conversation with myself, like it's time to get up, I exercise. And it's not a big long session. It's normally about 20, 25 minutes. And I do that most mornings. And if I don't do that at home, I walk the dog.
Yeah.
And I think having that half an hour, if I walk the dog, it might be a bit longer, at the start of a day, just gives you time to actually calm your mind down. Because the first thing that happens to me when I wake up is my brain goes, bing, you've got to do that, you've got to do that, you've got to call them, make sure you've done it, you've got to pick that up.
You do.
Yeah. So, and I know someone else who, my friend who set up her own business a couple of years ago, she's now getting up and she's journaling. So that's working for her.
Yeah.
You know, she literally writes down her thoughts, so gets the jumble out and gets that down.
So when that sort of feeling of being overwhelmed and to-do lists, and of course, once again, this is gross generalizations, but I think women are very good at to-do lists and things they need to do, and they're multitasking, and we're web thinkers, so we're thinking about 5 different things at the same time. We're not as super focused.
Is super
it's like
focused.
Laser focused. I need to do this, and I'm not doing anything else until that's finished. But we have so many pulls on us. So what happens when you get into that state? You get a big rush of cortisol, don't you? Which is your stress hormone, and it's your fight and flight hormone. So all of that's running through.
Can I just say, because I'm reading a book at the moment, that's really bad for your skin.
Cortisol.
You do not want cortisol.
It's bad for every part of you.
But as I'm like looking after my skin, I'm like,
100%.
right, okay, I'm going to be zen at all times.
Cortisol is your stress hormone, and it is so damaging physically, mentally, emotionally. So if you carve a little bit of time out, whether that's you doing exercise, whether that's me walking the dog, whether that's your friend journaling, what it does, and for other people, there's a couple of mornings, I sometimes will do meditation, like a 10-minute meditation. It just brings you down like that. So you're more able
to then deal
with the rest of the day.
Absolutely.
But what's interesting, because you know we both love exercise. My 22-year-old, she exercises in the morning. She gets up, she exercises, she loves it. When I get up in the morning, I can't think of anything worse as exercising. I need like 3 pints of tea, but I like to exercise at the end of the day.
See that?
So.
No, I'd
6
be like,
o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30, and she's like, oh, I don't know how, I just don't have the energy. But it gives me, it releases it brings me down and tension from the day, and then it gives me a big energy boost. So it's really funny how.
But that's the thing, I think we've all got to be really, that's why I was trying to like demonstrate a few different ways for anyone listening.
Yeah.
It's a bit like most of our conversations, there is no one size fits all, but there is an answer for everyone. You know, and for some people that will be, get up and start working. Like my husband, he's a terrible insomniac, essentially, and he will wake up any time after 3 a.m.
Oh, wow.
And it used to really stress him out, and it used to really upset the rest of his day, and he's just got used to it. This is his life now.
It's his flow.
And so he instead of getting stressed, he now often gets his phone out, and I go, what are you doing getting your phone out at 3 a.m? It's the worst thing you can do. That blue light's going to keep you awake, blah, blah, blah. He's written websites during that time. He's written emails. He's done that. And then quite often, he'll go back to sleep. Maybe for another couple of hours, like from 5 to 7 or something. But he's actually worked a way to make that time work for him. That would be absolute hell to me. That is my idea of hell, working at 3 a.m. but it's now working for him.
I think that's the thing. It's like you get your rhythm and your flow. And talking about like reinventing, I don't like the word reinventing because it's almost as, I think it's rediscovering or redefining, rediscovering, but it's not discovering who you were, it's discovering who you are now.
Absolutely.
And then more importantly, where you're going.
Yeah.
What are your dreams? What are your ambitions? What values? Because it changes, it's organic, isn't it? And it changes. And also, I think we deserve that. So, you know, the negative part of us will be going, oh, it's not, you know, who cares about ambition and desire and dreams? You're too old for any of that.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you're not.
You're not. You've got
You
half
never
your
are.
life still to go.
Yeah, well, I think the research says we will live till, on average, 82. But I was listening to some programs and they were saying, quite realistically, it's going to be mid-90s, late 90s. That's a lot of life ahead of you. That's, you know, suddenly.
I'm not very good at maths, but I'm trying to work out. I might even have more to go than I've already had, so hallelujah.
I think I've got less ahead, but I've still got, I think it was Jane Fonda did a brilliant TED talk on this, and she was talking about the 3rd chapter.
Right.
It's like a big, and a chapter's a big piece. It's not a couple of pages. You've got a whole chapter of life. So.
And would you rip that last page out of a book? You wouldn't, would you? You wouldn't go, oh,
yeah,
you know,
like,
you wouldn't. You want that last chapter of your book. It's one of the most important chapters.
I read a brilliant article talking about like self-discovery and adventure, and you know, and it was saying about how many like women now are wanting adventure, going on holidays, going on solo holidays. I've got 2 really good girlfriends, both kids grown up, leaving home, both in their sort of mid-50s, and next year they're planning to go away for 3 months.
Really?
They're travelling for 3 months, they've got their daughters joining them for part of the trip, and I was like, that would never have happened in my mother's generation.
Absolutely.
They just wouldn't consider it. It wasn't an option. And it wasn't even acceptable. If my mum said, right, I'm off for 3 months, my father would be, it just wouldn't. Whereas now, I do think the possibilities and the opportunities are endless, but it does take us to put our hands up and go, I'm going to do this.
Got to be brave.
Got to be brave.
Got to be brave. I was wondering if
Whether,
Sian,
I know, I was
if
thinking
Sian
the same.
has anything to add from the chat.
Yes, lots. Lisa says, I wish I could go back to my 20s with all this life experience, don't we all?
Oh.
What did you learn in your 20s which you wish you knew now? I think she was saying.
What have we learned now that we'd take back to our 20s?
Yeah.
I think the first thing I always say, I wouldn't go back to my 20s, even if I had the chance. However, the thought of going back to my 20s with this brain, this knowledge, this what I've learned in the following 20 years, I probably would. And I'm going to go with a really vain thing to start with, which is just wear SPF. because you just didn't. You know, I was a child from the 70s, and body oil was the SPF of choice.
It was.
Any
oil.
Well, yeah, actually, any oil. Yeah, a bit of vegetable oil.
Yeah, a bit of olive oil.
Oh, you see, I never actually did the foil.
Goodness.
Yeah, because I wouldn't mind, but I'm now there with my creams daily, trying to protect my neck. So anyway, yeah, that would be my first thing that I'd take back to my 20s. Look after your skin better, Katie.
Yeah, what would I... Do you know what? I think I would... The one thing that as I've aged, I've got a greater sense of, it's not an inner confidence, but I think we've had this conversation before. I am who I am, take it or leave it, right? And I think in my 20s, I was so caught up in being liked by everybody all of the time. And with that, if there's rejection, I took it all very, very personally. It's like, oh, I'm a bad person. And the reality is, there are going to be some people who don't like you. There are going to be some people who don't like me. They might not gel with me. They might not gel with you. That's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're not a good person, a nice person, an interesting person. So I think that's what I would take back.
Yeah,
a greater sense of, I am who I am.
You are who you are.
And actually, with that, I am who I am. That's something now. This is who I am. What you see is what you get. Back in my 20s, I think I was a product of what I should be or could be, or what my parents said I should be. All that conditioning that I grew up with. And I wasn't...
should be getting married by now.
I should be doing this, and society, all that sort of stuff. And so that's probably the biggest thing.
It's funny because I've got a 16-year-old daughter, and I'm trying so desperately to impart what I consider wisdom. It may not be wisdom for everyone, but impart the wisdom that I've got at my age. And I just wish that I could grab it all and put it inside her brain and go, yes, your friends are super important, but you know, if they're horrible, then they're not your friends, and don't worry about it. And there's so much I would love.
Personally, though. We just, and it hurts, and it's so painful, and and also, like, you follow the crowd.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, that's the other thing. It's like,
I've just thought
be you.
Yeah.
Be you truly, authentically. And that individuality, I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want to be an individual. I wanted to fit in and be like everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's like, why would any of us?
And yet,
and it's so restrictive.
I know, but yet when you see someone who is an individual, whether it's their character, their personality, whether they're a bit eccentric, whether it's their clothes they're wearing, whether it's the way they style their hair, we love it. Do you not think?
I love it.
I admire people and I go, you look amazing. And yet we're all so frightened to be that person, especially when we're young. And I have thought of one final one. I'm sorry, I'm taking lots because this is a really good question. Is don't hide your music choices. Music is a massive part of my life. I've loved it since I was a child. I grew up in a house where music was played constantly. And yet I hit an age, and especially when I went off to university, and people judged you on your music collection and what you were playing. And I like a wide variety of songs and music and musicians. But I was so fearful of saying, well, I like that and I like that, because basically I went to university in Manchester in the 90s, and you were only allowed to like indie Manchester music, and you were only allowed to dance like this. and I'm like, but sometimes I like pop music, and sometimes I like classical music, and sometimes I like a bit of country, and sometimes I like a bit of rock music. I like a bit of everything. But I went for years and years and years not admitting this. And now I'm like, no, I am who I am. Do you know what I mean? So I'm going to go back to my 20s and tell her not to hide her music choice.
Sarah says, I find it infuriating that all words before midlife have negative connotations, like crisis, midlife spread. There's nothing ever nice about midlife. How would you change it?
Well, this is what we're trying to do. And funnily enough, because on my Instagram account, I talk a lot about midlife, because it's something that's, well, we're passionate about. That's why we're here today. And I actually had a friend of mine say, why do you keep banging on about midlife? You know, that's not a great thing to be banging on about, Katie. You know, and your Instagram profile, you're meant to be a model and a presenter, and no one's going to want to employ you if you keep going on about midlife. And I said, that's the very reason why I'm going on about it, because we and many others want to change the narrative. We want to change this midlife crisis. We want to change the midlife spread and whatever other anti-aging, and we don't even want to go there again. That's what we want to do about it. It's why we're having these conversations.
Yeah, and it's not the actual word, is it? It's the connotation around the word. And I always say this, you know, middle age, I mean, middle age almost sounds worse than midlife. You know, it's like we're midlifers and all this sort of stuff. But it's the connotations that give it that meaning. And, you know, which is, once again, like you said, we're here because the connotations, the stereotypes, it is so negative. And I hope in 10 years or 20 years time, if you say middle-aged, they're like,
that's the time when I'm going to become myself. I'm going to get rid of these shackles. I'm going to like really embrace who I am. That's why we want to do this, is why we want to have this conversation. So yes.
And the word, you're right, you know, midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Is such a negative word, isn't it?
Yeah.
The connotations around that for men and women. It's like, oh yeah, they're going through a midlife crisis. You know, he's got the Ferrari.
He's got the Ferrari and a young girlfriend.
And, you know, and, you know, whatever she's doing with the tennis coach or whatever she's doing. Or, you know, I had a tattoo when I turned 50 and it's like, oh, midlife crisis. You know, is Grace having a midlife crisis? And you just think, crisis is a negative word.
Yes.
And the article I wrote about that was, we should get rid of that word completely, eradicate it from the dictionary, and I rephrase it as midlife choices.
Yeah.
Because you're a mid in your life and you want to make some choices, which goes back to the whole show today, which is about rediscovering, or not realigning, but rediscovering who you are
and who
you want to be for that next phase, and it should be a positive.
Yeah. Well, Brené Brown, who you
my
introduced me to,
she
she actually has a quote on this, which I put on my Instagram only a couple of weeks ago, which was, a midlife crisis is not a crisis. I'm not quoting her word for word, by the way. I'm paraphrasing. It's not a crisis. It's actually an unraveling. And when I first read this,
I love that.
I went, unraveling? Well, that sounds like I'm losing the plot and I'm going to start going crazy. That is a bit of a crisis. But then when you read the rest, it's basically, it's unraveling who you felt you've had to be, maybe, for the last 20 years or so. And actually, it's a time for you to unravel, and then, which is why we're here today, to actually then reinvent, rediscover, whatever in the positive, who we're meant to be.
And the unraveling doesn't have to be negative either. It's just unraveling who you've become. And sometimes, you know, you can still have that real sense of self, or your own sense of agency through your 20s, through your 30s, through your 40s. But through every decade, I think it's about deconstructing it a little bit and then saying, what have I learned through those, say, 10 years, through those life experiences? Where am I now? And if you talk about careers, people talk about career journeys, don't they? And having it mapped out, and you reflect and you put out your career path, and it's done very positively because you're developing and you're growing and and I think, well, why can't you do that with life? Why?
I was about to say, we're talking about like reinvention or whatever. We're not necessarily saying you have to totally reinvent every area of your life. You may look at your life like, do some due diligence on your life, and you might go, my relationship is brilliant. I'm loving it. Okay, no reinventing to do there. Children, love them. Yeah, whatever. Move on. Career, or how I feel about my looks, or whatever area. It may just be one area that you need to just, now you've got the time maybe to focus a bit more on that area that maybe you've neglected.
And it's a positive, isn't it?
Absolutely, in a positive way.
And I think, you know, I'll go back to my 20s, or, you know, Libby more in her 20s, because she's got her first job, and I watch her and I listen to her and I listen to her boyfriend and, you know, a lot of her friends, and they're mapping out, you know, they have dreams and they have ambition, and they're mapping out what they want to do and where they want to go. And I kind of sometimes feel we get going, you know, like I said, 30, you're making those choices and commitments. 40s is very much about the obligation, because we're busy, aren't we? You know, if you've got a big career, or you've got children, marriage or partnership, mortgages, it's the sort of obligation. And you're so busy managing all of that. It's very, very easy to forget yourself in that process. Not necessarily consciously, but you're just so damn busy. You're on that train and you're just, so I kind of sort of feel late 40s, maybe early 50s. It is, do you know what? And we're going to talk ourselves out with the word reinvention, but it's really hard, like a self-discovery, but I think it's a moment of re-evaluation.
Reflection.
Reflection.
Yeah.
So reflection, evaluation, and then mapping out, well, what do I want for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? And doing it positively. I think it's quite exciting.
In fact, I was going to say, let's look at it as it's opportunity.
Yeah.
It absolutely is a time of opportunity.
And that's exciting.
And then that is exciting.
Because you don't want to just give up and, you know, that's
absolutely
it.
Not. Anyway, yes, okay.
Ruth says that on reflection, she was so keen to people please when she was in her 20s. Did you suffer with that as well?
Yeah, or I just think it was, look back to my 20s and it was all about fitting in, pleasing, people's view and opinion of me. That's all I cared about. And the part of that was I didn't learn, I think as I said earlier on in this conversation, that it's okay if somebody doesn't like you or doesn't really gel with you. That's quite normal. So I was so caught up in what people thought of me. Yeah. So wanting to please because then you're a nice person or they would like you. Or it's absolutely exhausting because you're not living as your genuine, authentic self, are you? It's almost like a robot. You're like, it's so, I look back on that and that is the one thing I'm glad I've left in my 20s and even into my 30s and even
I think I'm still a work in progress.
Yes, and I think I am, because I was saying, I keep talking about our 20s and 20s, but actually in my 30s, right, first baby comes along, then I've got my second baby, then we're moving house, and, you know, the kids going to school, and once again, I was so caught up in how I was perceived and what my value was, and oh, well, that person's child's doing something way more advanced than my child's doing, and they've got a really big house and I've got a small house. And I think so much of your self-worth and value is caught up in other people, what you feel is other people's opinions of you.
Yeah.
And that eats away at your self-confidence.
But they're not always even real opinions. They're the opinions that we make up in our own head that we think people are thinking about us, but actually they probably haven't even got brain space to think about you. And if they have, they're not living their best life because they're spending too much time worrying about someone else.
And I really felt it, you know, in my 30s, because I was probably one, maybe two full-time working mums in a school where, you know, women had made the choice to be at home, which was like amazing and fantastic. And I didn't have that opportunity and that wasn't my life at that point in time. But I felt I stood out in such a negative way because of it. And the pressure I put on myself because of it, instead of just saying, yeah, I've got a career, that's it. It doesn't make me a better mum or a worse mum or, you know, a worse mum is sort of what went through my head. And you always feel it's almost like a sort of subconscious competing. Yeah. And why would we want, you know, we create competition with ourselves and then with everybody around us. And it's just, I don't know, it's the energy it takes.
I have to say, I truly admire anyone who has totally been able to go, I don't give a what anyone thinks.
Yeah.
Because there's certain areas that I have been able to do that in, but in other areas, no. I'm still that person that's going, okay, yes, all right.
I think it is work in progress, because as much as I sort of like say, I am who I am, take it or leave it, this is who I am, blah, 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 blah. Of course there are other areas. And I think that goes back to one of our basic human needs, again, is sense of belonging in a community. Because we're not silos, we're not islands. We have to have, right? Even if you're the most introvert, you still need that network, that sense of belonging. It makes you feel safe. So, you want to be, so I can see, I don't think you'd ever really, really lose it. But the difference is, in my 20s and into my 30s, that is what drove me, dictated
your choices, or
my choices, and how I felt. And it robbed me of I think that's what it is. It robs you of your confidence, and it robs you of your self-worth. And it made the working, this is a massive conversation, but the career mum, working mum is a program show in itself. What it did is it made me feel as though I wasn't a good mum.
Right.
And for any mum to feel that, and actually most women you speak to, whether they're working or not, we all feel. And a really, really good girlfriend of mine, she was the first of our group to have a baby, and I'm actually Joe's godmother. And she said to me, God, the thing about motherhood, Grace, you feel guilty if you do, you feel guilty if you don't. Actually, you feel permanently guilty, so you may as well just ride it out. And I was like, God, I don't believe that. And then now I'm like, oh yeah.
It's the truth. And it's, I think that's the same. Again, there's a quote that I can never quote verbatim, but it's like people are going to judge you, whatever you do. So you might as well just do what you're going to do. Exactly, because they're going to judge you, whatever. So just do it, whatever. So, Sian, then more.
As Sue said, her zest for life in her middle years comes from some difficulties she had in her 30s and 40s, and she's just really determined now to make the most of every second that she has now, which I think is really important. You do get that feeling of time is running out a little bit. I've got to go for it.
And I think you value time because, you know, we were talking earlier on about our hairdressers. You've had the same hairdresser for
27 years.
I've had the same hairdresser for nearly 25 years. She did my 30th. She did my hair. She did my hair when I got married.
Yeah, same.
And I think those 25 years, over half of my life has gone like that.
Yeah.
And then I just think, so that's the other thing, is like time, this isn't a rehearsal.
Yeah.
Time, my mum always used to say that, oh, you wait to get to my age and you realise how time, and I was like, oh, you know, I'm 18. What do you mean? I've got the whole lifetime times 3 ahead of myself. And it's actually, you realise the value of time and how quickly it goes and how important it is, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And what was the name of that lady? Susan. I was the same as Suze because I went through a divorce in my 30s, and it broke me in many, many ways, especially emotionally. And I was very low for a number of years. And then when you finally come out of that, you really do appreciate all the good times.
Yeah.
And they say that, don't they? You know, you don't get rainbows without the rain and all that. We have to have those bad times. So any of those bad times that we or anyone watching or listening have had during our earlier years make us really appreciate all the good times that we have now.
And actually, because I was listening, I sent it to you, didn't I? We're definitely going to do an article on this, and it will be one of the shows on resilience. And I love the topic of resilience. You know, do you learn how to be resilient? Or does it come naturally as you age and all this sort of stuff? And it was talking about mindset again, but it's through those tough times that you do work through and you do come out of, and you come out the other side, that makes you appreciate. And she was saying about the other part of that is, and I think that's the appreciation we have as we age, is life isn't always rosy. When I look at my young girls, and I was the same. I had such like dreams, and I mapped it all out, and there wasn't pain, there wasn't loss, there wasn't sorrow, there wasn't hardship, there wasn't heartbreak. It was all so and actually when you get into your 40s and 50s and the reality of life, it is tough and it's difficult and it's painful. It's so bloody painful and devastating at times. But if you didn't have those, you wouldn't appreciate the good things.
The wonderful times.
And the wonderful times, because it gives you that value. And what this TED Talk that I sent to you, she was saying, like the whole gratitude thing, which I actually do love, because it's easy. Focus on what you have,
not on what you don't have.
what you don't have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Focus on not what you've lost, but what you've gained.
Yeah.
So I think we become much more mindful, if that makes sense. And the other thing she talked about is when it's good, enjoy it. Completely enjoy it in the moment, right there, and absorb it, because sometime around that corner,
it's going to be gone.
It's going to be gone for a moment.
Yeah.
So almost wallow in it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's just such an interesting conversation.
I know in your blog post about the topic that we're discussing tonight, I know you said, why have we got all these like cliches, life begins at 40 and 50 is the new 40, and that you can find it irritating. But because your blog post then made me like, okay, I'm going to I ban those around. Life begins at 40. 40 has been my best years.
50 is the new 30.
Yeah, all that. But then I
It's
thought about it, and I went, I actually quite like those things, because
they're positive, aren't they?
Because they're positive. And again, hearing people talk like that woman on the TED Talk, hearing those phrases, they're all exercising that positive muscle.
Absolutely.
So whether they're a bit of a cliche, and no, we shouldn't have to need them, because we should go, whoa, I'm heading towards 40, it's going to be the best years ever. You know, and I hope that with time people will start to change that mindset. But in the meantime, anything that helps me to just exercise that positive muscle, life begins at 40, 50's new 30, whatever it is.
Yeah, because
I'm
it's
going to help. I'm going to use it.
Yeah, and why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you if it gives you that boost? And in the article, and I can't remember who said it now. Menopause.
Hang on. You talk, and I will try to remember, because
I can't remember who said it.
It was his name. I do know his name.
40 is the old age of youth. Victor Hugo, thank you. You're reading it, aren't you?
No.
I just, it's like menopause, and I was like, who is it again?
Yes.
40 is the old age of youth, and 50 is the youth of old age.
Yeah.
So I'm technically then youthful, and you're old.
I'm older.
You're old. So you're older than me. Perfect. But I love that.
Yeah, I really like that. I did like that 50 is the youth of old age.
And why would you not use positive? I know they're a bit cliched, aren't they? Everything's a cliche. But we have cliches because they have some truth to them. And if they're positive and they give you, so what do you want to go? Yeah, I'm 50 and over the hill.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
what
which
horrible.
one would you prefer?
It's downhill from here. Yeah, thanks.
And I used to write for a wedding blog, and it was beautiful. And I actually got married for the second time when I was 40. And I remember saying to the makeup artist, right, I want you to make me look amazing, because I'm going to be 40 and it's going to be downhill from there out, and this will be the last. Basically, I was sort of saying, this will be the last day where I'm going to look good, and it's all going to go down there. And I've kicked myself, because I wrote this in the wedding blog. I kicked myself so much after that for actually saying that out loud to someone, and I'm so glad that in the following 8 years, I've changed my mindset so much to adopt this positive mindset to getting older. And 40-year-old me needs a slap.
But the reason why we say things like that is because there is so much negativity, negative connotations, negative rhetoric around middle age. It is a dirty word.
Yeah.
It's, you're not beautiful, you're not vital, you're not relevant. It's so, that's sort of, I've said this before, we live in an ageist society, and age doesn't have real value, which is the whole pro-age, not anti-age, and the whole pro-age movement. We need to change that. And actually, I've just started scoping out an article, because this month, I'm going to be 55. And I was really, because you can tell I think about, get a bit intense, and quite a deep thinker. And I was like, 55. And some of the feelings it was evoking in me was actually quite negative.
Right.
I'm like, oh,
But
55.
I'm a pro-age warrior.
But it was interesting. So I can be pro-age. It's like work in
Yes.
progress, isn't
Yeah,
it?
absolutely.
But I was like, 55 sounds so much older than 50. Whereas before, yeah, I've just turned 50. Well, actually, it's...
And don't I look good for just turning 50?
but I've never really said that. But anyway, but I don't know. It's just so... And I'm like, why am I thinking like that? And that idea of when I'm not going to be attractive, that's it, 55, I'm no longer attractive, or all those feelings come from somewhere, and it comes from all the conditioning. It comes from, we've talked about this before, you know, not having, you know, mature models in ad campaigns, even for products that are aimed at that market.
Absolutely.
Or, you know, actresses not getting the part to play their age, which is actually a really good friend of mine's an actress, and she went to audition to play a middle-aged woman, and they came back and said, oh no, and it went to like a 35-year-old. It's like...
And also, because there was a Harper's Bazaar column, article, it actually went out in April, and this was the first year that Hollywood at the Oscars embraced older ladies. However, if you look at the statistic facts on casting, so like say you've got a 55-year-old actor, he will always be cast with someone in their 30s, not someone in or even like realistically, someone early 50s. She will be considered too old to be cast alongside her male partner, even though in real life, let's be realistic,
Absolutely.
I'm on average, we're normally within 5 years of each other, aren't we?
Yeah.
In Hollywood, no. There's 15 years plus.
So you wonder why we have this negative feeling about aging. But anyway. So before we close for another great show, Shard.
Right, so actually, Sandra said, I tell myself not to worry so much. And Meg said, I probably tell my 20-year-old self to live in the moment more, stop worrying, which obviously worrying is so bad for our skin as well, isn't it? For cortisol.
It is.
And
yes.
It says we should tell our children, look forward to middle age, you can please yourself more and you care so much less about what everyone's
100%.
And
so we should promote it.
Absolutely.
And the generation.
And that is what I'm trying to do with my teenagers. You know, I'm trying to show them, you know, leading by example, but if I can't lead by example, by at least sharing that this is not, you never worry about getting older.
We are good role models though, because I think I talked about this in one of the earlier shows, that we're sort of much more blended.
Yes,
You know, so I take my teenage girls, and then obviously Livs is 22, but we're much more blended in how we live our lives. Like we like the same movies, we like the same music,
and clothes,
we buy the same clothes. So that, you know, we like, I don't know, we're much closer, whereas with in my mother's generation, or with my mother, it was like she was this in her little box and I was here in that box. Whereas now, and actually not last weekend, the weekend before, my 22-year-old had her 21st, and it was the first big event since lockdown, and she had like 100 of her closest friends. And you know,
100 close friends.
No, but you know, from all aspects from her life, like her closest, dear, no, but her, yeah, well, you know what it's like when you're that age. She had her Leeds uni crowd, she had her school crowd, she had, you know, the boys from the local, you know, that she went to school with, all the way down to some of them that she was there. She went to school with when she was 4, and it was amazing just to see all these young people out free. I was up till 3:30, dancing and. My mother would not. She'd be like, it's 12 o'clock and I'm going to bed, and you know, and it was just blended. I don't know. It's like our conversations just very, very different. So I think hopefully their view of middle age is not the view, that we had growing up.
The generation above. I totally agree. And just before we finish. This was a conversation from the hairdressers earlier, and he went out with a group of his friends, and some of his friends have got early 20s children, and he said, and they came out this one evening, they went to a pub, then they went for a Chinese meal, then they went back to a pub, and he said, I found that I was the one that kept saying, look, if you want to go off and, you know, do what you want to do, that's fine. And they were like, no, we're having a great time. You know,
Yeah.
there was you know, a bunch of 30, 40 and 50-year-old people out, and some of their children came. And it just worked in the way that previous generations probably wouldn't have done. It wouldn't have been seen dead.
I think as well, it's I think it's relevance. So when I talk to like the girls and their friends, the conversation we're having has some relevance to it. So they might be, whereas, you know, they might be talking about music or fashion, or I like to be relevant. I like to know what's going on. I want to understand their sort of music. I like their music. So we can have conversations, and there are much, not better, but open lines of communication. Whereas the communication with my parents was very one directional, and it was very, you do this, you don't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. And with my girls, I try to explore and I try to listen, and I want to understand. And, you know, we've had a lot of very big open conversations, which I would never, ever have had.
Yeah, it's the same with me.
With my parents. You know, and then, you know, we like the same movies or humour, or I don't know, it's just, I think we're just more blended.
Yeah. And even if there's things that I really can't get my head around, my daughter's into this streaming thing at the moment, I've actually said, talk to me about it, because I don't want to be so left out. You know, I want to stay in touch.
Be able to have that conversation.
Yes. So there we go.
So, how do we sum up then?
This can be a very, very exciting time. Personally, I believe. However, mindset plays a very important part.
Yeah, and a belief that it's not downhill from here.
Ban yourself.
There are mountains and peaks that we can climb.
Yes, absolutely.
And on that note, thank you everybody for watching and tuning in again. Sian, you did a brilliant job with all of those comments, and absolutely loved having you all here. And we will see you this time next week.
See you then.